You don't need anyone to explain this to you. That's the uncomfortable truth. You already see it. You already feel it. Somewhere deep inside, there is a quiet voice that has been speaking to you for a long time. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it just reminds you, and every time you ignore it, it gets a little quieter. But it never disappears. You know what's wrong. You know the habit that's draining you. You know the relationship that's pulling you away from who you're supposed to be. You know the routine that looks productive on the outside but feels empty on the inside. No lecture revealed it to you. No book uncovered it. You recognized it yourself in moments of honesty you rarely sit with. The problem was never a lack of awareness. The problem was never confusion. The problem is that knowing comes with responsibility, and responsibility demands change. We live in a time where information is abundant, but courage is scarce. People scroll endlessly, listen endlessly, consume endlessly, yet remain exactly where they are. Why? Because information doesn't threaten comfort, but action does, and so we convince ourselves that as long as we know, as long as we intend, as long as we plan, we're making progress. But deep down, we know that's not true. There is a difference between being unaware and being unwilling. Unaware deserves patience. Unwilling requires honesty. If someone genuinely doesn't know what's wrong, you guide them. You teach them, you show them, but when someone knows exactly what's wrong and still delays, still excuses, still postpones, that's a different matter entirely. That's not confusion, that's avoidance. And avoidance is subtle. It dresses itself up as busyness. It disguises itself as waiting for the right moment. It convinces you that tomorrow will somehow be easier than today. But tomorrow doesn't change, your decisions do. You already know the conversations you're avoiding. You already know the boundaries you haven't set. You already know the discipline you keep promising yourself you'll start soon. And every time you push it away, something happens inside. You don't just delay growth. You weaken your trust in yourself. Because the more times you ignore what you know is right, the harder it becomes to act when it truly matters. This is why the greatest battles aren't fought outside of us. They are fought in those private moments where no one is watching, where you could easily justify staying the same and no one would question you, but you would know, and that's enough. Don't underestimate how heavy it is to live against your own conscience. It drains you, it creates restlessness, it makes you tired even when you've done nothing physically exhausting. Because carrying truth you refuse to act on is exhausting. And here's the part we don't like to admit. Sometimes we don't change not because we can't, but because we're afraid of who will disappoint if we do. We fear standing out. We fear being judged. We fear the discomfort of becoming unfamiliar, even to ourselves. But ask yourself honestly, has staying the same brought you peace, or has it just made the days blur together? Knowing what's wrong is not a curse. It's a gift, it's clarity, it's guidance. Many people would give anything for that level of self-awareness. But awareness without movement becomes a burden instead of a blessing. And you feel that burden, don't you, in the quiet moments, in the pauses between distractions, in the late hours when you're alone with your thoughts. You don't need more reminders, you don't need another sign, you don't need permission, you already know what's wrong. The only question left is whether you'll finally honor what you know, or keep pretending you don't. Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment, without defensiveness, without excuses. Most of what holds us back isn't confusion, isn't lack of ability, and it isn't even lack of opportunity. It's comfort. Quiet, familiar, well-furnished comfort. The kind that doesn't make noise, doesn't alarm you, and doesn't look dangerous, yet slowly keeps you exactly where you are. Comfort is not evil by nature, but it becomes dangerous when it becomes your standard. When your highest goal becomes staying at ease, avoiding disruption, avoiding inconvenience, avoiding difficulty, because growth, by its very definition, will always ask something from you. It will always require effort, sacrifice, and moments where you feel stretched beyond what's familiar. And this is where many people stall. They don't reject change outright. They just keep postponing it. When things slow down, when I have more time, when I feel ready. But comfort whispers to you, not yet, stay here a little longer, and weeks become months. Months become years, and suddenly you look back and wonder how life moved forward while you stayed still. Comfort makes stagnation feel justified. It convinces you that since you're not suffering, you must be fine. Since things aren't falling apart, there's no urgency. Since others seem worse off, you have nothing to complain about. But comfort doesn't ask whether you're becoming better. It only asks whether you're feeling okay. And feeling okay is a very low standard for a meaningful life. Think about it. The things that shaped you the most, the moments that matured you, strengthened you, clarified you, were any of them comfortable? Growth never arrived wrapped in ease. It came with discomfort, uncertainty, and struggle. Yet somehow, once we taste stability, we begin to resent the very discomfort that once built us. Comfort resists discipline. Comfort resists consistency. Comfort resists accountability, because all of those demand that you do what you don't feel like doing when you don't feel like doing it. And comfort says you deserve a break, you've done enough, tomorrow is fine. But tomorrow has been fine for a long time. Comfort also has a way of lowering expectations, not all at once, but gradually. You stop aiming high, not because you stopped believing, but because believing requires effort. You start settling, not because you're incapable, but because striving feels tiring. And over time, your potential doesn't disappear, it just goes unused. And unused potential doesn't leave quietly. It turns into frustration, regret, a vague sense of dissatisfaction you can't quite name. You're busy, but unfulfilled, distracted, but restless, comfortable, but uneasy. That's the paradox. Comfort promises peace, but delivers numbness. And here's the subtle danger. Comfort makes you allergic to discomfort. Even small challenges feel overwhelming. Even necessary change feels threatening. You begin to interpret resistance as a sign that something is wrong, when in reality, resistance is often proof that something meaningful is happening. Discomfort doesn't mean you're failing. Sometimes it means you're finally moving. Every meaningful transformation asks you to let go of something familiar, a routine, a mindset, an identity, and comfort will fight that surrender. It will remind you of how predictable things are now, how safe, how known. But what comfort never tells you is the cost of staying. The cost is growth delayed. The cost is discipline weakened. The cost is becoming someone who talks more than they act. And the longer you stay comfortable, the harder it becomes to leave, not because you can't, but because you've trained yourself to avoid difficulty. Muscles unused weaken. Resolve untested softens. Courage unexercised fades. This is why discipline feels heavy at first. This is why change feels awkward. You're not broken. You're just stepping outside what comfort built around you, and that discomfort you feel, that's not harm. That's resistance breaking. Comfort will never demand more from you. It will never challenge your excuses. It will never call you higher, but life will. Reality will. Time will. And one day, whether you choose discomfort now or not, discomfort will find you anyway in the form of regret. So the question isn't whether you'll face discomfort. The question is whether you'll choose it now or be forced into it later. There is something deeply tempting about excuses. They soften the blow. They protect the ego. They allow us to feel justified while staying exactly where we are. And the more intelligent a person is, the more sophisticated their excuses become. They sound reasonable. They sound thoughtful. They even sound responsible. But at the end of the day, an excuse is simply a refusal to carry responsibility for one's own choices. We live in a culture that has mastered the art of explanation, but forgotten the weight of accountability. Everything has a cause, a background, a context, and while many of those things are real, they quietly become shields. Shields that stop us from asking the most uncomfortable question of all. What is my role in this? It's always easier to point outward than inward, to blame circumstances, people, timing, upbringing, systems, pressure, fatigue, and understand this clearly. Many of those factors are real. They affect us. They influence us. They shape us. But influence is not ownership, and explanation is not exemption. At some point, if a person wants to grow, they must stop asking only "why did this happen to me?" and start asking "what am I going to do about it?" That shift is where accountability begins. Excuses don't just delay progress, they quietly train the soul to expect less of itself. Every time you say, "I couldn't because," without following it with effort, you reinforce the belief that you are powerless. And that belief is far more damaging than any external obstacle you face. Accountability, on the other hand, is heavy. It doesn't feel good at first. It forces you to admit that some of your pain is self-inflicted. Some of your stagnation is chosen. Some of your frustration is earned, and that's not easy to swallow, but it is freeing. Because the moment you accept responsibility, you regain control. You cannot change what you refuse to own. There is a strange comfort in blaming others. It gives you a sense of moral relief. You're not wrong, just wronged. You're not lazy, just overwhelmed. You're not undisciplined, just unlucky. And maybe in some cases, those things are partly true. But partial truth becomes a full lie when it prevents action. Ask yourself honestly, how long have you been telling the same story about why you can't move forward? How long have you been rehearsing the same explanations, hoping they'll eventually turn into progress? Excuses age well. They sound just as convincing years later as they did on day one. But accountability doesn't age, it compounds. Small acts of ownership today build strength tomorrow. Small refusals to hide behind excuses rebuild trust with yourself. And that trust matters more than you realize. When a person repeatedly avoids accountability, something inside them fractures. They stop believing their own promises. They stop taking their own intentions seriously. They talk, but they don't act. They plan, but they don't execute, and over time they become spectators in their own lives, commenting on what should change while never being the one who changes it. Accountability doesn't mean harshness. It doesn't mean self-hatred. It means honesty. It means standing in front of the mirror without a defense attorney. It means saying, "This is where I am. This is what I've done. This is what I haven't done. And this is what I will take responsibility for starting now." Notice something powerful. The moment you stop blaming, you stop feeling stuck. Even if the situation doesn't immediately improve, your posture toward it does. You're no longer waiting for others to change. You're no longer waiting for conditions to be perfect. You're moving even if it's slow, and slow movement with accountability is infinitely better than fast excuses with no direction. This is why personal growth always feels lonely at first. Because accountability removes the crowd. There's no one left to blame, no one left to impress, no one left to convince. Just you and your choices, and that's where strength is forged. You don't rise when excuses disappear from the world. You rise when excuses disappear from your vocabulary, when "I can't" turns into "I didn't," when "they stopped me" turns into "I stopped myself," because those statements, as uncomfortable as they are, carry power. The moment you stop outsourcing responsibility for your life is the moment your life finally becomes yours. There is a dangerous illusion that settles into the heart when we confuse understanding with obedience, when we mistake awareness for progress. We begin to feel accomplished simply because we recognize the truth. We nod along, we agree internally, we say, "Yes, that's right." And somehow we believe that this agreement counts as movement, but it doesn't. Knowing what is right without acting on it doesn't elevate you. It quietly erodes you. There is nothing more unsettling than a person who knows exactly what they should be doing and continues not to do it. Because now the problem is no longer ignorance, it is contradiction, and living in contradiction takes a toll. Every truth you learn places a demand on you, not tomorrow, not eventually, now. And when that demand is ignored, something inside begins to fracture. You feel it as guilt, as restlessness, as an undefined heaviness that follows you even when life seems fine on the surface. That is the weight of unacted truth. We often assume regret comes from mistakes we made, but some of the deepest regret comes from clarity we ignored, from moments where we knew better and chose comfort instead, from insights that could have changed us had we honored them with action. Awareness is not neutral. It is either a doorway or a witness. It either leads you forward or stands there silently watching you betray what you know. And here is the uncomfortable reality. Every time you learn something and fail to act on it, it becomes harder to act the next time. Not because the truth changed, but because you changed. You trained yourself to hear truth without responding. You dulled your own sensitivity. This is how people become desensitized, not to noise, but to guidance. You can attend lectures, read books, listen to reminders, and still remain unmoved. Not because the message wasn't powerful, but because action was postponed long enough that conviction lost its edge. The heart says later, until later never comes, and slowly sincerity weakens. This is why action, even small, imperfect action, is sacred. It keeps the connection between knowing and becoming alive. It preserves integrity within the self, because integrity is not just about honesty with others. It is about consistency between what you believe and how you live. When those two drift apart, the soul feels divided. You see, knowledge was never meant to sit comfortably inside you. It was meant to transform you, to rearrange priorities, to interrupt routines, to demand sacrifice. And when it doesn't, when it simply decorates your thoughts without changing your behavior, it becomes a silent accusation. This is what self-betrayal looks like, not loud rebellion, not dramatic failure, but quiet postponement, subtle delay, telling yourself you agree while continuing as you were. And the tragedy is that no one else sees it. No one else knows, but you do, and that knowledge follows you. People often ask why they feel distant, why motivation fades, why discipline feels heavy. Sometimes the answer is simpler than we want to admit. You stopped honoring what you knew. You heard truth, but you didn't move, and the heart does not respond well to being ignored. Action doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't require perfection. It requires sincerity. One step taken honestly is more powerful than 1,000 insights admired from a distance. Because action restores alignment, it brings the inner and outer back together, and once alignment returns, clarity deepens, strength increases, trust in yourself begins to rebuild. Understand this clearly. The purpose of awareness is accountability. The purpose of insight is movement. If they stop short of that, they turn against you. They don't elevate you, they expose you. So when you recognize what needs to change, don't applaud yourself for noticing. Don't congratulate yourself for understanding. Ask the harder question, what am I going to do about it today? Because truth that is not acted upon does not leave you where you are. It leaves you less than you were. There is a myth many people quietly believe, even if they don't say it out loud. The myth is that one day they will wake up and feel ready, that motivation will suddenly arrive, strong and clear, and from that day forward, change will be easy. But if you've lived long enough, you already know that day rarely comes. Motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with mood, energy, weather, praise, disappointment. If your life depends on motivation, your progress will always be fragile. Discipline, on the other hand, does not wait for feeling. It moves even when desire is absent, and that is why discipline, not motivation, is what actually corrects what's wrong. Motivation feels good. It inspires, it excites, it makes big promises, but discipline is quieter. It doesn't give speeches, it gives structure. It shows up on ordinary days in ordinary moments when no one is watching and nothing feels dramatic. And it does what needs to be done anyway. Most people don't fail because they never felt motivated. They fail because they never built systems that carried them when motivation disappeared. Discipline is not intensity. It's consistency. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about doing something repeatedly, and that repetition changes you. It reshapes your identity. You stop being someone who hopes and start being someone who follows through. This is where real transformation happens, not in emotional highs, but in disciplined patterns. Discipline creates boundaries. It decides in advance what you will and won't tolerate from yourself. It removes daily negotiations. You're no longer asking, "Do I feel like this today?" You already decided, and that decision saves you from your own fluctuations. That's why discipline feels restrictive at first. It takes away choice. But what it gives you in return is freedom. Freedom from inconsistency, freedom from regret, freedom from starting over again and again. Motivation says, "I'll act when I feel ready." Discipline says, "I'll act so I can become ready." And understand this, discipline is not punishment. It's care, it's self-respect in action. It's saying, "My future matters more than my current comfort." Every disciplined act is a vote for the person you want to become. This is also why discipline feels lonely. Motivation loves crowds. It thrives on applause, on shared excitement, on being seen. Discipline is content with obscurity. It works in silence. It builds when no one claps. And yet, discipline is what people admire in the end. You don't admire someone because they felt inspired once. You admire them because they were consistent over time. You don't trust someone because they spoke well. You trust them because they showed up repeatedly. Discipline builds trust with others and with yourself. And when discipline is absent, motivation quickly turns into frustration. You feel inspired but stuck. You want change but lack traction. You keep restarting, recommitting, resetting, never realizing that the missing piece isn't desire but structure. Discipline also teaches patience. It reminds you that real change is slow, that results lag behind effort, that progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Motivation wants immediate reward. Discipline accepts delayed outcomes. That patience is what separates those who last from those who burn out. And here's something crucial. Discipline is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you practice. Weak discipline isn't a character flaw, it's an untrained muscle, and muscles grow through resistance, not ease. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when you don't feel like it, you strengthen that muscle. Every time you break your word to yourself, it weakens. This is why small disciplines matter. They are not small at all. They are rehearsals for larger ones. If you cannot be disciplined in the small, private areas of your life, you will struggle in the big, visible ones. Discipline doesn't promise comfort. It promises alignment. It brings your actions into harmony with your values, and that alignment produces a quiet confidence no motivation can replace. So stop waiting to feel different before you act. Act differently, and the feeling will follow. One of the most subtle traps people fall into is the belief that change belongs to the future, that it will begin after something else happens, after life settles down, after clarity arrives, after conditions improve, after fear disappears. We tell ourselves we're not ready yet, as though readiness is something that descends upon a person rather than something a person chooses. But the truth is, readiness is not discovered, it is decided. Change does not wait for perfect timing. Perfect timing is a story we tell ourselves to justify delay. Life rarely hands you a quiet, open window and says, "Now is ideal." More often it says, "Now is inconvenient." And that inconvenience is not a barrier, it's the invitation. There is no moment in your life where fear fully disappears before change begins. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is movement despite it, and the longer you wait for fear to leave, the longer you stay where you are. Fear does not vanish with time, it vanishes with action. This is why people look back and say, "I wish I started earlier." Rarely does anyone say, "I'm glad I waited." Delay doesn't refine intention, it dulls it. What begins as careful consideration slowly turns into hesitation, and hesitation quietly becomes habit, and habits are powerful. They shape your days, and your days shape your life. The moment you decide to change is rarely dramatic. It doesn't always come with confidence or certainty. Sometimes it comes with trembling. Sometimes it comes with doubt. Sometimes it comes with a deep breath and a quiet resolve that no one else notices. But that moment, however small, carries more weight than years of intention. Decision is the pivot. Before the decision, everything is theoretical. After the decision, everything becomes possible, not easy, but possible. Because once you decide, you stop waiting to be saved by circumstances. You begin to act within them. Understand this clearly. Change does not require you to see the entire path. It only requires you to take the next step. Most people don't move because they want guarantees. They want certainty about the outcome. But growth has never offered guarantees. It offers opportunity, and opportunity only opens for those who move. The decision to change does not remove struggle, it reorients it. Instead of struggling with regret, you struggle with effort. Instead of struggling with guilt, you struggle with discipline. One struggle drains you, the other strengthens you. Not choosing is still a choice, and it has consequences. Staying the same is not neutral. Time does not pause while you hesitate. Life continues to shape you, either intentionally or accidentally. If you do not decide who you want to become, circumstances will decide for you, and that decision is rarely kind. The beauty of deciding now is that it interrupts the cycle. It breaks the pattern of delay. It restores momentum. You stop measuring yourself by what you meant to do and start measuring yourself by what you are doing. Even small decisions carry power when they are real. A single boundary enforced. A single habit started. A single excuse rejected. These are not minor victories. They are signals to the self. I am no longer waiting, and something shifts when that happens. Your posture changes. Your self-respect begins to return. You trust yourself a little more. Not because everything is fixed, but because you finally moved. Change does not require permission. It does not require applause. It does not require validation. It requires resolve. And resolve is often quiet. People will misunderstand your decision. Some will question it. Some will be uncomfortable with it. That's not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign that movement disrupts the stillness others have made peace with. But remember this, the cost of change is paid once. The cost of staying the same is paid every day. You already know what's wrong. You already know what needs to change. And now you know this as well. There is nothing missing. No final sign is coming. No perfect moment is waiting. The moment it begins is the moment you decide.